Tomorrow kicks off Dreamhack Leipzig, and for the first time in I think a good couple of years, we're not having CSGO as the headliner, of course. Clashes with the major, so it makes a whole lot of sense. This time Rocket League will step up and take its place. A very exciting time for everyone in the Rocket League scene, because this is the first major lander that we're going to have of 2018. A great bar setter, considering that we've already seen the announcement of the RLCS Season 5 and the RLRS qualifiers are ready to come up, so why not get as many of the best teams in the world as you can and put them into one big group where, or one big tournament where really anything can happen. So we'll just jump into it. We'll take a look at each of the individual groups on all the individual teams. We're also lucky enough to have a couple of online tournaments that have been going on in the initial part of 2018. So I've got a general overview of teams' online performance. I don't want to factor too much into what online performance means in the LAN setting, because for me, in my experience and my sort of analytical standpoint, online doesn't really mean a whole lot to the grand scale of offline tournaments. So we'll see. Hyper Cup and Ting Open will be taken into account when coming to analyze these teams. But for the most part, we're going to be going broad strokes, especially for the first few groups, because they are pretty one-sided groups. Group A, we've got Energy, Envious, and London Esports. London Esports have Godsmiller, which is something, but I can't lie. I just don't see a way of someone like London Esports being able to bring a kind of group upset against the likes of Energy and Envy. It just seems very, very, very unlikely to me. And yeah, seems like they're going to be going out. The first group stage, sort of like round number 1, is sort of to weed out the lower seeded teams and try to get the best squads into the second round of group stage in the playoffs. So yeah, Group A and B and C, and I think D to a lesser extent, but still to a certain extent, are going to have some very one-sided affairs going through. And speaking of Group B has Flipside Tactics and Equinox and Advanced Gameware. Then again, it's a similar situation where Advanced Gameware do have a couple of notable names. Got Tadpole, Finex, Diame for sure, and I remember those guys. I've seen them in a couple of different EU weeklies. But again, I can't really see them going all the distance when it comes to Flipside and Equinox. It's just, you know, very, very different levels of play when you see them overall in the Rocket League landscape. Same thing for Group C. Guessu, the X-Market side, they're extremely strong. They got Fnatic, they're extremely strong. Up against Rocketeers, who were initially announced as one of the a new sponsor to a new team. They're sort of like the new magazine site, like, you know, content going around the Rocket League space. And I'll be curious to see what they can do with the magazine site. But as it stands for this roster, Imagine, ELMP, and Mars, they have been together for a fairly long time. These three, they've won a few different weekly tournaments, but again, they've never really broken into that minor stage, so I can't really see them going very far in this one. I think they will go out in the group stage. Probably will do a little bit better than their other team in this group, SRD, who are consisted of Nitro, Tibsy, and SRD. I haven't heard of Nitro and I haven't heard of SRD. I've heard of Tibsy though. He again has been in a few different good tournaments, especially with not PRL Rivals, where I've been working. Seen them a couple of times. Had some decent results. I don't think he's ever gone the full distance of taking a weekly tournament, but again, you're taking a look at a weekly tournament versus teams who are in the RLCS, and I just can't seem to see the competition. So yeah, broad strokes over the first 3 groups. Now we're going to go into a bit more detail with group letter D, I should really say, because we've got a few more familiar names at the topper end of the scene. The dudes consisted of Ralph, AXB, and Jaro, who have had a little bit of success, not a major, serious amount of it. They actually got first at Dreamhack Montreal, which is okay. You know, $12,500 prize pool. It is a pretty decent takeaway. I think the problem with it is that taking a look at the context of that tournament and really who was competing in it really kind of dulls it down for the dudes. The only really notable team was Onyx Black, and they actually made it to the finals anyway. Both sides had a very easy run through the bracket, and the dudes actually managed to come out on top. And I don't really mean to put them down. I still think they're going to be able to make it out of this group. But when it comes to their deep runs in tournaments, I don't think they'll go much further than maybe the second round of group stage. Actually depends on really where they'll be seeded. If they come up against one of the really strong teams like your Enviouses and your Gale Forces, they will have a couple of problems. I mean, if they actually get reseeded into another group like the likes of Team Secret, who are also in this group, I doubt they will because of the way that seeding works. But you never know. I just feel like that maybe they might get past this first round and then go out in the second is the most likely option for them. I've also got Team Expert in this group: Vel, Ice TZ, Almost Lucky, and Coca. Not really heard of these guys at all, to be honest. Coca, I know, was from the Juicy Kids once upon a time. But that's really the only reputable side of things for Expert, and even then, he's not even on the starting roster. He's a sub, so, or at least according to Wikipedia, he's a sub. So I can't really give a whole lot of insight to Expert. Doesn't really feel like they'll go much further than this group stage, especially with the dudes in who have, I think probably, with the exception of Team Secret, the most reputable standing in this particular group. And speaking of Team Secret, actually they're next up on the list. Tydacto Flame, iGnite, actually a pretty famous bunch of talented guys. Seen them in many different tournaments and leagues. I remember seeing them back in Leaf League, the first tournament that I ever casted, well over a year ago at this point. And seeing them kind of working their way up, very, very capable. Have already managed to come out goals so far this year, and really kind of swinging out nowhere, because they haven't really had many good RLCS runs or RLRS runs in the last couple of seasons. So seeing them come through and take the Hyper Cup against the likes of XL, WLF, and even Envious in the finals, actually that was a 4-2 result. That's some pretty decent names that you're beating out there, and yeah, we'll take into account that it is online, and whether they can replicate that same sort of performance in this particular LAN environment will be questionable. We can still see exactly what they will be able to do, especially if they get to round 2, where they will be able to face up against some of these more notable teams. I think it's going to be an interesting time. I want to pin them to be my dark horse, to be honest. I feel like there's a decent shot they could upset a decent couple of teams. The only real teams that we've seen them give them real trouble so far this year have just been Envious and Gale Force. Gale Force beat them in one game in the group stage of the Hyper Cup, and Envy, of course, took 2 games away from them in the finals. But WLF went 0-3 down, XL went 0-3 down. So Secret have come out with a huge amount of performance, and I'm quite curious to see exactly how well they do. Whether this will be a flash in the pan performance, or whether it's just online getting to their favor, and whether they'll just completely crash out of LAN, that's all yet to be seen. I still think they'll be able to get out of this group, though. The 4th team is Turtle Esports. Only name I recognize from this is Rennie Rentia, and that is about it. Again, a name from the weekly scene, nothing significant in the major LAN, and therefore I hedge my bets on the dudes and Secret to make it out. Now, this is where we get into the really interesting half. Those first 4 groups are sort of like the highest seeds versus the lowest seeds. And as a result, we've come into the middle of the pack area, where I think the most interesting games are going to be taking place for this group stage. We've got Group E, or as I like to dub it, the EU Group of Death. Because actually 2 of these teams in this particular group are very, very close. The only exception to that is Gale Force, who I think are going to have absolutely no problems getting out of this group stage. They should have a very, very easy time. The other 2 teams, however, are XL Esports and the Juicy Kids. My personal ranking, in the way that I personally see these 2 teams, I see them kind of on the same level. XL weren't able to make the RLCS playoffs. They, of course, were sitting at the top 6 in RLCS the season, so they retained their spot into Season 5. But overall, in their performance on LAN and online wasn't really the best. We already mentioned that 0-3 against Secret in the Hyper Cup, as well as that they didn't make playoffs in Gfinity and went out in the regular season. They placed top 4 in SPL's Gauntlet as well, which is okay, I guess. Nothing major significant. I casted that game, and I remember seeing them get relatively far, but they went out in the semi-finals, obviously, and we can't really take much away from that, again, being an online tournament. Juicy Kids almost made their way into RLCS. I would have thought it would have been a very interesting time to see them get all the way to the top and get into the RLCS, especially if you saw them versus XL. It really would kind of define who is the better team. Are XL solidly in the RLCS, or are they at best flaky against the likes of a team like the Juicy Kids, who almost topped out the RLRS overall? As well as that, I haven't seen much of them on LAN, so the difference in environment will always take into effect, and whether they'll crack under the pressure is something that's yet to be seen. Again, I want to see how the matchup between them and XL Esports will go. That'll be one to watch, and I really hope the stream catches that, because that'll be one where I actually will turn off of the major, yes, the CSGO World Championship, to watch that particular game, because I feel like it would be very, very interesting. So we move on to Group F, which is the NA Group of Death for me. And again, Group of Death, because it's not really so much as very, very strong teams in one group. It's just that some very middle-of-the-pack seedings with one world-class team, G2 Esports. For me, I class them as my top 2 team in the world, my second-best team in the world, just behind Gale Force. that for me is really where they stand. They shouldn't have any problems getting out of this group. But the other two teams are Dignitas and Rogue. And two teams that I would say are about middle of the road when it comes to the RLCS and their overall performances. Obviously, Dignitas have had a lot of history behind them. Just recently signed by the Dignitas organization. Chicago Turtle and Zol were part of Fibion before that. And they were also under the... I can't remember what the Knicks team name was, but since November, they've been away from Fibion and they've been doing their own sort of thing. Had some really good results as well. They went into both the NA qualifiers for the Ting Open. Top 8 at the first, and then they got first at the second. So they're into the Ting Open. I'm going to see how well they can do well at that. But while they were under Fibion, they got first place in the North American RLRS, top 4 at the Cyberpower PC tournament, and they won in their PRL Rival Week versus Renegades. So yeah, some very reputable tournaments, some very reputable results to their favor. Definitely a lot better in my opinion than the likes of Rogue, but for Rogue it's a little bit more of a wild card pick for me. They've got Moses in their squad, and according to what I've been able to find, I don't follow North American Rocket League as hard as I probably should, but Moses has been on trial with Rogue. He's not an official member with them as far as I can see. For me, Rogue are sort of like the Excel of North America. They are in the RLRS. They are competing in a certain manner of form that keeps them up at one of these top 6 spots in the world. Also, top 6 spots in their region, I should say. But they're not able to lock out those deep tournament runs in the RLCS. So the question really is on Moses. How is he going to fit into the team dynamic of Rogue overall? Because, you know, team dynamic is a very, very delicate thing. You can change one portion of a team, and it could completely affect the whole outcome. And even take a look at Northern Gaming at the RLCS Season 3, or was it Season 2? I think it was Season 3 when they had Turbo Pulsar in there. I think that's really what kind of pushed them over the edge. To have a player like Turbo Pulsar in that squad is what pushed them to the World Championship point. So GG on their side of things. For Rogue, it'll be curious. I'll be very, very interested to see how Moses does in that particular team dynamic. We go over to Group G, which isn't really a group of death. It's got two EU teams and one North American team. The team that's probably pinned to go out of this group relatively easy in first place is someone like Method. They are here. They've had a very high amount of reputability over the past year. They've stuck together as a 3 for almost a year, which is longer than I think most squads in esports really stick together. I know that's for sure for Counter-Strike. Like, we haven't got, with the exception of someone like Virtus Pro, I don't think we have a squad that's been together for longer than about 8 months or so. So, you know, it's actually, now that I think about it, Astralis are also in the sort of like the year range, but about a year is sort of like a very long time for a team to be staying together. So having those 3 in their current state of form at their almost career best, I think just a little bit further on their consistency side of things, then they will be able to lock out some very good world-beating results. But having their chemistry together, you know, completely craps on every single other team, or most of the other teams that they come up against, where at least when star power doesn't necessarily counter that style of play. So they should have no problems against Ghost Gaming, who I wouldn't say are near the top rankings of North America. And Copenhagen Flames are an interesting team, but we'll get to that in a minute, because, you know, Ghost Gaming do well at below a tier 1 level, but they are unable to make deep runs at Premier level tournaments, especially at LANs. Take a look at the E-League Cup. They got group stage out of that one. I think they actually got bottom of their group, which is an unfortunate turn of events. Top 6 of the RLCS LAN, which is decent. Nothing fantastic, though. I'd say once you hit that top 5, that top 4 sort of level, then that's when you really may have made a very impressive run through the LAN environment and through the World Championships. And then you got to look at the likes of the online scene of things. They got top 4 at Cyberpower, second at SPL's Gauntlet, and top 12 in the Leipzig qualifier. So they weren't actually able to get the free tickets to get to the LAN. They have to pay their way here. So, you know, their online results seem reputable enough. But it's coming down to that LAN performance that really is going to kind of hurt them. And that's always a great opportunity for bubble teams and teams who have been competing in the weekly space to kind of step up and really kind of take that kind of thing away from them. In their case, they're fine because they're the only North American in this group. So it will be, you know, if they go out now, then they haven't really got a major contender for that spot in the overall space. But Copenhagen Flames have a lot to prove. And, you know, they are the EU side. They are the 3rd team of 3 in this group. And if you've been following weekly Rocket League tournaments, particularly the Rival Series, where the bunch of us have really gotten behind the Copenhagen Flame story, you'll know who these guys are, you know what they're capable of, and you'll also know that they've been having a hell of a time for the past 3 months. They've had roster swaps, trying out different players, and generally poor placements at weekly events. A team that used to be extremely good at weekly events and managed to run all the way through the tournament as the top seed, get themselves the title and walk away with it. Not able to push past that weekly side of things. They've got a little bit of improvement and work to be doing with it. But they've never been able to, but even now and in recent times, they've been struggling at that weekly level. Nice to see that they're starting with their original starting roster though. Bake, Ebogrand, and Fruity. They are 3 interesting players, 3 players that have a lot of great chemistry together. I was saying earlier that they were struggling, but it'll be nice to see if they can work out their issues and if they can bring some decent performance. If they can take a good series against Ghost Gaming, there's an opportunity that they'll upset them right there and then and just call it quits. They could go to the second stage of the group stage, which would be a very interesting time if you do ask me. Whether they'll make it out of that, it remains to be seen. I don't think they would. I wouldn't hedge my bets on it. But Copenhagen Flames, I definitely think they have a decent shot against Ghost Gaming. I still pin Ghost and Method to be the favourites, but Copenhagen Flames are a team that I'm very interested in and a team that I'm extremely hyped to be seeing at this kind of event. So I want to see them go far. I really want to see whether they can compete at that kind of a level, because they are just one of those teams that I feel like just on the verge of breaking through to sort of like the tier 2 level, but not quite getting there just yet. Now, Group H, the last group, is a mix of EU and North American teams. Again, we've got Veritas and PSG from the EU side of things, and Splice from North America. PSG, again, no problems here. Should be able to make their way relatively easily out of the group. You'll notice that there is a bit of a common trend, and I just think that, the fact that I'm saying there's so many teams, at least there's one team every single group that should be able to easily make their way out. It's just a case of great seeding on the admin's part. That's really what we should be seeing at this kind of a stage. This early in the tournament, all the big teams should be making it out of the groups. All of them should be making their way into the playoffs, and we should be seeing all the reputable names up there. But taking a... Ow. Didn't mean to do that at all. But taking a look at Group H, we've also got Veritas and Splice. And one of these 2 teams do have to make it into the next stage of the group stage. Which one will it be is the question. You've got 2... Actually, I want to say they're 2 sort of misfits, mishaps sort of style squads. You kind of got the remains of various different teams that used to be together and used to have very reputable results, kind of coming in together and forming these 2 squads. And it's actually quite hard to predict as a result. We've had a similar situation over in CSGO, where we have a couple of different teams of the likes of FaZe and Optic. If you know anything about those guys, you'll know that basically those were the star players and the big names that couldn't really find a place in sort of the traditional team styles. So they went ahead and formed their own squads, and they went ahead and tried for some very, very, very good results, to the point now that FaZe Clan are actually one of the top 2 teams in Counter-Strike overall. And there's a lot of that potential in particular with these 2 sides. You've got Veritas, who I'm not sure if they're sponsoring this team as a mix or as an official roster. If it's a mix, that'll be underwhelming. But if they're an official roster and they're working like this, then this is actually quite a lot of decent rep. You've got Tigray, who is formerly of Reason Gaming, that was part of Reason Gaming during that extremely good run in the Season 2 of the Elite Series, where they completely whitewashed every single team, 7-0 in the regular season, and then 4-3 in the grand finals against the Endpoint squad. So he's got a lot of great rep there. Alex also, Alex161, also formerly of an Elite Series team Epsilon, had a great run in Season 1. Repex, currently or formerly of Epsilon, it's not really clear whether he is officially part of the roster at this point in time, which is why I say this might be a mix. I'm not really 100% sure on the inner workings of that particular squad, but that's a pretty decent lineup. I wouldn't say world beaters, I wouldn't say not yet. I think they have a bit of a ways to go in terms of trying to, fight their way out and really muster up a solid sort of a 3-man squad to really get there. But this is, I think, the first time I think EU has ever tried a misfit style squad of this kind of a caliber. Same thing for Splice. They've got Karma, they've got Southern, and they've got Dude with the Nose. Fantastic name, I might add. You all know Karma, fantastic player of her own right, been around the scene for ages, and had some, pretty decent runs in certain tournaments. Nothing amazing, though, and that's my real problem with Splice as a whole. All of their squads, all of their rosters don't ever seem to make extremely deep runs at even a tier 2 level of tournament. That's why I feel for Karma, because I feel like she's an extremely good player. I feel like she could go very far with the right roster. Whether Sather and Dude with the Nose will be that is still yet to be the case. Is still yet to be seen. Sather, formerly of Hollywood Hammers, had a very, very good set of results for them. And Dude with the Nose, who's formerly of Phibion, who I've already talked about in regards to the Team Dignitas side, has had some very good results as well. When trying to predict which side will come out on top in this particular group stage, who will be joining PSG among the rest of the teams that will progress into round 2 of the groups, you've really got to kind of overlay each sort of individual player's own achievements. We've got Splice, who've never made it deep into a tournament, even though Karma is the only constant in that case, and she'll be the only player that rolls over. The bottom line is still that she hasn't made any major achievements under the Splice banner. Dude with the Nose has had some good results. RLCS Summer Series 3, standing in for NRG, and of course second at the Cyber Power event, standing in for NRG as well. So most of his achievements have come through standing in for NRG. And Sathu also top 4 RLCS at the Summer Series with Phibion, and also got the win at Rival Week #1 against Rogue. So, you know, good results. I wouldn't say they're at the top level, though. And it's the same thing with the other squad, though. Tigray was part of Reason Gaming that dominated the Elite Series. Didn't really come up against some of the major players in Rocket League, though. And I say that, I mostly want to refer to the likes of Method. Method were sporting their second squad through basically most of the season, pretty much. When they came up against Reason Gaming in the regular season, it was not a lot Metanaris and Magnus. It was the other B team, almost, I want to put it, for the Method side. And you know, Reason Gaming were able to take that. That's a nice victory on the record books, but there's like a big asterisk on that of whether they really were able to come up against Method. If they were able to take that victory against Method, then suddenly that would mean a whole lot more. But sadly, it doesn't quite get there. Repex as well got second in Gfinity Elite Series Season 1 under the Epsilon banner. I think he was a sub, though. So, while all of these are great results, they all have their sort of individual caveats. I think the only one really standing out above the other is Sathu. And as a result, just on the basis of that one result, I kind of want to lean towards Splice, but it is an extremely close call, especially when you factor in the fact that all of these group stage matches are going to be best of 3. It's extremely unpredictable to really see where either side goes, and that's going to lead in sort of my closing points. While most of my predictions and most of my analysis kind of goes towards the favor of the favorite teams making it out of the group stage, that's just kind of it because it makes the most amount of sense. Best of 3, though, any team could be on a poor day, any other team could be on a fantastic day, and as a result, any number of upsets could come through that could basically cost any chance for one of these squads to make it forward. So really, we have to wait and see. If there aren't any major upsets, then we really have to watch back and see exactly what's gone wrong for whatever side. A few names that I do want to note that I do have a slight concern about the likes of PSG and Method for the most part. Because while PSG are known to be a fantastic team, I've also known that for the likes of Bluey and Chaussette, especially the likes of Bluey, there is a certain risk to go in an underwhelming performance, to have a really off day. And we've seen it several times from PSG. I remember back when they faced off against Method in the Rival Week 2 matchup against Method, they crashed out hard. I know that Chaussette wasn't playing quite right. Bluey was stepping on his toes. Chaussette was stepping on Bluey's toes. Couldn't quite line up the team play. Couldn't quite line up the star shots that would have meant, you know, absolute insanity from that side. It just wasn't coming through to them. And if they have an off day, especially on that first day, then that could be the end of PSG's run and a very disappointing group stage exit in round 1 of the group stage. Method also another team as well, who I want to say that are lesser so, but still at a bit of a high risk for this one. They have got a lot of consistency among their side. They have got a lot of chemistry between those 3 players. And I imagine that they'll have a relatively easy time getting through that group. But we have noticed that at certain points as well, when they really come up against the big challenges, they will have a bit of an issue. If they get sorted into a second round group, which is very difficult, especially with the way that there could be an upset in the best of 3 side of things. They could take second seed over that group and get seeded up against a first seed on another group like Gale Force, who we know that they've struggled against in the past, is going to be a bit more of a difficult time for the likes of them than anything else. So just a couple of names that I kind of want to note out as really sort of like the stand-up potential for upsets. Best of 3 is going to be an extremely unpredictable side. I've already mentioned that. So look forward to some very interesting times. Look forward to a very interesting tournament. But let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what your predictions are in the comments below. And I hope to see you back here probably tomorrow evening, actually, after those group stages done. We might be able to make another video. If I can get the time in, I might make a video about the round 2 groups. Till then, though, I'll see you soon.